You're listening to the Grind Line Podcast.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of the Grind Line Podcast. I'm your host, Greg. You're listening to episode 324. I'm here tonight with Ryan. Ryan, how are you?
Oh, super. We finally got a press conference.
Yeah, it was a press conference that took 1,000 years to get, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, the reason, I
good.
guess, was people were saying that Yzerman was scouting the juniors tournament for draft picks, like the upcoming draft. And if he's there, he can't really have a press conference, and they wanted to do his, and as we saw today, want to do his and Todd's at the same time. So to be able to coordinate on that took a little bit of planning, it seemed.
I saw something about Steve somewhere, but I think I got it mixed up. Trent Yanni is apparently in attendance at the Grand Rapids game tonight.
Huh.
Which is ironic because they're down 3-0 with apparently bad defensive play, and Yanni's in attendance. So great things.
Oh, Lord. All right. Well, we do have a podcast tonight. We have, like we said, the press conference happened. There was a press conference. It was long. It was a lot. If you would like to read it in written form, you can go check out our Twitter page at Grindline Pod, and you can find it there. I do the recaps of all the press conferences as they are happening so that people that can't watch them in real time can just scroll through a feed and read it. So Yzerman started out this press conference kind of weird. Instead of starting by directly just taking questions, he had like a whole lengthy like written statement.
Prepared.
Yeah, he like prepared, which maybe it took him a week to compile his notes on the season. But he started by saying that he started 6 years ago with a focus on drafting and developing and will continue to do that. That certainly not every pick plays in their first year and that they need to develop until they are ready. And the rookies that have come in have given them hope that they are on the right track. And they felt at the beginning that they could make a wild card spot. Same when they made a coaching change, not making it was a disappointment for them all. So that was kind of Yzerman's opening statement to the press. I feel like he tried to get some stuff out of the way before he got pounded with the same question over and over and over and over again. But it was interesting that he had like a prepared written statement first and they didn't just jump right into questions.
Yeah, you could tell he was trying to get ahead of some of the BS because you look at most of the player interviews, and yeah, there was a few personalized questions, but a lot of them were regurgitated and just worded in a different fashion. So he obviously was paying attention to that and knew what to essentially expect. And I thought he opened it pretty well in terms of setting a tone that he wasn't happy.
Yeah, Yzerman started with some heat. I mean, he's known not to take shit from any reporters, really. And then, like, the first question is, Steve, that was like a really prepared statement. Is that based on what Dylan Larkin said about you? And like, he's like, dude, like, chill out. That was basically what Yzerman said. He's like, no, it's not about Larkin. He's had conversations with Larkin in private, and that he wasn't going to make any of those public. He said that if Dylan wanted to make those comments public, he could. It's not Yzerman's kind of way to talk about what he has said to another player. And they've talked about it before. I could see why maybe, as where a lot of people took it the wrong way. I just thought that Larkin was like, hey, let's just like, we could have maybe used a little bit of a spark, but also acknowledging that it's up to them to do it a little bit too. And Yzerman said the same thing, and McLellan said the same thing. I don't think that was Larkin taking a shot at Yzerman, because someone else even asked, like, is that Larkin speaking for the room, or aren't all the guys like really disappointed? And he's like, yeah, I mean, they're disappointed, but they're also like super optimistic.
Well, in McLellan, I don't know if it was around this point, but he came out and said that, like, hey, we felt that we were a good enough team to contend. You look at the team, like he called out specifically in Ottawa and Montreal, that like, hey, we are as good as these guys, and we can match up with the teams that they're currently playing with right now. I think the recent track record, that, yeah, it's been a back and forth with Washington, but they compete well with Washington. Detroit did. They competed well with Toronto. Toronto, I think, kind of struggled a little bit with Detroit, really going back the last couple seasons. But again, it's all about, can you get there? And they weren't good enough. And that was really the simple point that Yzerman and McLellan were making about that.
Yeah, we tend to struggle with bad teams and tend to overperform against good teams. It's just, and that's the way it's been for the past few seasons. We'll go out and we'll beat Tampa 3 out of 4 times, or we'll go out and beat the Leafs we'll split series with the Leafs, or we'll win series against the Leafs, but then we'll lose series against Ottawa, we'll lose series against Buffalo. It's just the way it's been for the past couple seasons that we generally beat the teams that should be better than us, and we play down to the teams that we should be beating.
Well, yeah, and really at this point, most of the teams are now trying to actually beat the officiating.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it was Helene that asked about trades, if they were kind of disappointed that they couldn't make any. He said that he was comfortable, not happy that they weren't able to make a trade by giving away high picks or prospects. He had really stressed the fact that that's basically what people were asking for. They wanted guys like Casper. They wanted guys like Danielson. They wanted high picks. And he said he would have done it. They were prepared. His quote is, they were prepared to do it, use picks and prospects or any player if the trade made them better in the long run. And we had also talked about this extensively. Like, could you have gone out and got Cousins? Yeah, but you would have had to trade a pick and Casper. And that doesn't make you better in the long run. And people are like, well, look, Ottawa's in the playoffs now. Well, yeah, I mean, they're one game away from getting bounced. And they had to give up a center who is arguably better than Cousins and a pick in order to get Cousins in. So I that just from the way you're building your team, it didn't make sense. And Yzerman kind of confirmed that. He said they would have done it if it would have made sense. None of them made sense.
Yeah, I think that's the key one. Is that part of the quote that I was able to pull is that he said there were no good options. And then to kind of paraphrase the rest of it, there were no deals to bring in anyone of particular significance to improve the roster based on like what you just outlined, what the cost was going to be. Because yeah, it'd have been great to get them into the playoffs, but what does that do for them over the next several seasons? And as you've seen with some of the moves that he's made, particularly like that, if he's like, go and look at DeBrincat, out the long-term impact that he's going to bring for Detroit and is already bringing them. But you're not trying to go sell the farm for a rental. You're not in a position to do that. And that's essentially what he was re-emphasizing is that, hey, yeah, we would have liked to have traded away a first round pick maybe, but for what?
Yeah, he even emphasized like at the deadline, Montreal and St. Louis, they made no moves, but they still made the playoffs.
Yep.
At the deadline, the Red Wings looked to improve, but there were no good options where they would have come out a winner. And that's the big one. He's basically like, it's got to come from inside the room. Like, the room has to be playing well enough in the first place where those complementary guys add on to it. And the room at that point was not playing well enough, putting themselves in a position to win well enough where just bringing in one guy would have made the difference.
No, and I think that plays in. So I was kind of already touched on what McLellan had stated, that this team was good enough to be there, but they just didn't do it. And maybe a part of that impact was you had Raz and Kopp out for at the exact same time. Then Kopp was done for the season. Maybe that did play into it a little bit, but he reiterated the fact that this was a team that saw 2 7-game win streaks since McLellan took over. They showed that they can go out there and compete at a high level, but then it just essentially fell apart. And then there was no coming. They couldn't dig themselves out of it. So to say that you needed to, I think it's safe to say we were all upset something didn't happen more than the Mrazek trade at the deadline. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. But at the same time, you go back, you look at what was dealt, and we talked about this several times over, who you had to have given up to go get Rantanen, even a Dylan Cousins for Ottawa. You weren't matching that. And if you were trying to match it, you were going to give up more than what is actually going to help your team out over the next several seasons.
Todd said, to that point, Todd said that he believes that the team on the ice was good enough to make the playoffs. He said in his quote, when it got shitty, they got deeper into it instead of pulling themselves out. He said bringing in people wouldn't have mattered. The team in the room needs to change their mindset in order to make the playoffs. If the team had the mindset to do it and didn't let their downs get too down, then yeah, maybe bringing in a guy would have helped them do it. But he even said, like, bringing in a guy into a locker room where the morale is just low because of a couple losses in a row, that brings down the other player too. One guy is not going to rally the whole team.
Mhm.
Steve was even asked, like, are they concerned by the morale without the moves? Did he get a sense of frustration? He says, yeah, there's frustration and disappointment. It's expected. But did he get feedback on morale taking a dip? No. He said he's counting on his best players and leaders to give that morale boost because that's what they're paid for. That's what he said. And like, this was Yzerman blowing up the media for asking dumbass questions. This was Yzerman blowing up his leadership group for not being like, for getting too emo in the room, basically, and just not being able to overcome it. And Todd was even asked about like being able to overcome things. And let me see if I can find that. Todd says that the focus on Larkin is bigger because of the C, but others also need to answer for their performance. They need qualities that they can count on in certain moments that need to come up when the situation presents itself. They don't need cheerleaders. They need
Mhm.
stabilizers when the team needs stabilizing. They need deflectors that can take the pressure off the leadership group when things aren't going correctly. He says that he feels like those personalities are already there, that coaching just needs to develop those guys and work on those skills. He even mentioned guys like Sider, guys like Raymond. They expect those guys to fill out those kind of roles, but they are still young and learning how to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's the key one too. And we saw that with I think maybe a lot of people's frustration with what Ray and Larkin were doing toward the end. Your go-to guy, without a doubt, guys, was Kane and DeBrincat. But players that had led the way pretty much majority of the season were Larkin and Raymond. They were just kind of there. And I think that was the frustrating part. And we looked at a lot of that from the start of March onward, that you expected maybe just a little bit more. And really, after the Four Nations, it just seemed that something like the candle was just kind of fluttering rather than just a full on fire. And that's what they needed, was that full on fire. Because when Larkin's going on all cylinders, it shows on the team. When he's not, it shows on the team. And we've seen that heavily the last several seasons. And that I think that adds to the frustration from the fan base.
Yeah, Todd was kind of asked, like, how do you get the players to learn not to let the game get away from them? Basically, that compounding loss. Todd says that the coaching staff has to drill that into them. There are moments when you can't score, but you still need to play and manage the game. And he specifically brought up Toronto and Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews. He says they're not over pressuring situations and they just eat time. He said they've done a great job learning how to win, not just score. You have to manage the game to win. Said you have to keep pounding away at it, become more resilient. They'll hear a lot of that moving forward. And if they're still talking about that at game 82 of next season, then there's a problem. Basically, it's manage the game. You're not going to go out there and score every shift. You're going to have some bad offensive nights, but it's what you do when you're not scoring that is the most important part. And that's basically what he's saying is like Toronto, the reason they're in the position that they're in right now is because, yeah, they have some high powered offense, but when they're not scoring, those guys know how to shut down lines. They know how to eat time. They know how to play keep away and play a defensive game. That is something that this team has to learn how to do.
And I think that speaks to what we've really seen in regards to guys like Casper and MBN and some of the rookie forwards in particular, as they're coming into Grand Rapids, and what they're trying to emphasize with them to learn and grow under is, yes, you were a scoring machine before you got here. Now it's time to make you a complete player. And that I think echoes what they've been trying to push, yes, at the NHL level, but also in particular at the AHL level for all these younger guys coming in that they're unfortunately waiting for.
Yeah, but to end like this kind of first segment, we're just going to talk about this. Next, we'll go into kind of free agency outlook and Grand Rapids kids. The last thing I want to say about McLellan, there was a really like they had asked like Todd, what was it like coming into the room? And he joked, he's like, normally I'm the guy leaving the room mid-season and not the one coming in. But he said that that they flew by the seat of their pants initially, and he was basically calling all the guys wrong names. Says the players were attentive, they were hungry and willing to adapt. Says they took some responsibility and everything went well from there. Relationship, structure, and style and daily rhythm are all in place now, which gives them a head start on the season. Steve also says that players in exit interviews were optimistic and enthusiastic about the coaching change. The guys are excited to get going into the next season with this staff. Even the guys that are UFAs And on that note, we knew that Alex Westland was not coming back, the goalie coach, but LJ Scarpace, the video coach, is also not returning next season. So they will get 2 new coaches this offseason.
Really don't have much else to add.
I think I was just really impressed with McLellan throughout the entire press conference, because he shoots it straight. He will call out guys. He knows, it sounds like he has the perfect read on the room and knows what he needs to do going into next season. And he's just like, the answers are really refreshing. It's really like when he's not bullshitting you out there. It's like the opposite of Alone, where it would be hard to kind of get an answer out of him. Todd shoots it straight.
Yes and no. I mean, I think the refreshing part was Lalone was giving us pretty straightforward answers, but it's just the delivery is very much different. You can tell that Todd's been around much longer. You can tell that he's been a head coach for many more years. And I think for where this roster is trying to get to, that is a game changer for them. And it speaks to how we saw them come out playing after he took over. So the biggest thing and highlight that we've kind of hinted at is that him having a full offseason with this team could be a game changer. We hope.
Yeah, I think it sounds like he's ready to do it too. Like he has in mind what he needs to do to get them going. And it's going to be a lot of working with the guys throughout the offseason to come up with a plan to get to know them, like really get to know them better and have them work out. Because that was one of the biggest things. Like, they got to get in the room, they got to get in the gym, they got to get better habits. Like, they need to work themselves out and then figure out where they're going to fit next season. But what we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit about the questions on some guys in Grand Rapids and going into the offseason, what the plans might be for free agency. So give us 1 second. Word from our sponsors. We'll be right back. The NBA 82 game grind is done, and now the real fun begins. The NBA playoffs are here, and it's time for the high-stakes drama, clutch moments, and jaw-dropping plays. I can't wait. If you're looking to make the playoffs even more exciting, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered as an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Try placing a bet on your favorite player's performance. Will they drop 30 points, 40, or more? It's your call. Here's something special for first-timers. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Make it a playoff run to remember with DraftKings. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ice.
And we're back. And one thing I kind of want to bring up before we get into the other subject is Steve was asked if there was anything that jumps out to him about the March slumps. And Steve said the interesting comment, they need more depth, which is kind of what you've been trying to build this whole time. But they relied too much on the power play. There wasn't, this is like repeating what we've said the entire season, relied too much on the power play. Wasn't enough offense from the bottom 6 or 5v5 from the top 6. Need to get better players and demand more of the guys that are already on the team. Anyone with eyeballs can tell you that was the problem. I mean, people without eyeballs might be able to tell you that was the problem. It was, if we would have just had the bottom 6 guys chip in 8 more goals on the season, if we would have just had the top 6 score 3 more goals at 5-on-5, you're in the playoffs. Like, there's your difference right there. And like I said, anyone with eyes could see it. And like, how do you fix it? Steve said, he was asked, are they prepared to go big this offseason? He said, absolutely. He said, they have felt all along that if there's a player that wants to come here and if they fit, they will add them. They have a good nucleus and they would absolutely entertain big contract players, which is good to hear.
Yeah. And I think what speaks to that too, and that's just the unfortunate reality, is that they lost a lot of goal scoring. And some of that you could argue was depth, but most in particular was defensive scoring, because they had finished this season with 235 goals for, 259 against. Last season, 275 for, 273 against. Great. They got better, quote unquote, defensively based on, if you look at just the piece of paper in front of you. But dropping 40 goals is a pretty big deal. And I think I'd have to double check where they actually finished the season, but going into like the final week and a half or so, they were the third worst scoring team by defensemen in terms of goal output. So that speaks to it pretty heavily, but it also does speak to the lack of depth scoring and support, because outside of your top 5 forwards, actually 4 forwards and a defenseman, you weren't getting much. And that's where you look at, and I know they kind of touched on it briefly, but they talked about Tarasenko. I think there was a much bigger expectation there. There's a lot bigger expectation with Berggren, and we've talked on these before. And that's just where things were, you needed more from somebody or several people, and it just never happened.
Yeah, and Tarasenko, he had mentioned that Tarasenko got better looks than he did basically scoring goals. Like, he played really well, and he said it kind of got in his head a bit and got him frustrated, is that he was getting good looks and he was getting chances, but nothing was going in. And that kind of was down on him. He said he expects a lot more from him. To the other part, though, about getting depth guys, he was asked about pro scouting. And this is where Steve did like the ultimate dodge, basically, in around like the longest way possible to say that they're not changing pro scouting. He said that free agency has been a mixed bag. The shorter term signings have been very good. Most players play 1 or 2 years and serve their purpose. On the longer term contracts, you're paying a premium for those players. You have to take their play in relation to their cap hit. He says the current team, he expects more from the guys that they have signed in free agency. Would they do anything different? The pro scouting staff, he said, has some new faces, and he thinks highly of them. They're learning the league more and they're understanding more, which means that he brought in guys that are brand new to pro scouting, and they're still getting used to doing that, which is kind of confusing when you're trying to rebuild a team. You would think you want some guys that really know what they're doing and have been around for a bit, because you're trying to really reinforce that positive play and get the guys who are younger, like winning guys around them. And they kind of did that by going out and getting Stanley Cup champions. But he says that basically they're not making any changes in pro scouting, and that the pro scouting guys are learning as they go.
Okay.
It's disappointing, right? Like we said, like they should probably clear house in pro scouting because of some of the bad signings, but they feel the complete opposite, apparently.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out.
He was asked about the kids in Grand Rapids. So on the kids in Grand Rapids, he says the playoff run is extremely important for them. Says the rookies on the wings were counted on in key roles for Grand Rapids last season. He mentioned Johansson. He mentioned Berggren and Edvinsson. He says that the new group of guys are going into the same situation. Skills that can be carried. These are skills, he said, that can be carried into the NHL. These playoff grind situations. Apparently not now, since they're losing horribly. And the defense is not defensing. But it's important for guys like Nate Danielson. It's important for guys like Amadeus Lombardi, these guys that you think are on the doorstep. Of course, playoffs is extremely important for them.
Yeah, and that's all you can hope for at this point, is that, for one, I mean, tonight is not a good thing, but actually just 20 minutes ago, they made a change in net and Soup went into goal. So take that as you will.
Well, I heard that D wasn't helping Kosa at all, and it's not his fault.
Yeah, so I don't know. I unfortunately don't have the game on, but they're not playing well. And really, regardless of how the games end for them, and I know we can lean in heavily to get to Brandon and Jen and the group out there to with their eyeballs directly in the game. Just keep growing and improving yourself, and don't fall into bad habits. And with guys like MBN and ASP making their debuts here essentially in North American playoffs, like, it's going to have to be the same thing. Like, Danielson struggled coming in. It's a brand new world. Yes, if they don't do as well, will it be disappointing? I don't know. I guess it depends on how you want to look at it. But the fact is that they're here, and now you hopefully that countdown is beginning to see them here. And as long as they're learning from the experience, whether or not it depends on how it goes, that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, he was asked about like their mindset too. The kids down in Grand Rapids. Yzerman mentioned Mazer and his unfortunate injury. He still has high hopes for him. He's said today, whether it's Mazer, ASP, Lombardi, they're all progressing. He can't say that they're going to be on the wings next year. If they force their way into the lineup next season, that would be great, he said. He was then asked about Kosa, and this is where it got really interesting. He says Kosa's going into year 4. They're looking for him to take another step. They're not prepared to put him in the NHL. says his play dipped after the All-Star break, and he would need to take another step in the playoffs to maybe play himself in. He's trending in the right direction, but needs to do more to play in the NHL. And that is one where you're like, it's just not how long is it going to take? Because I know goalies are like the hardest to develop and they take the longest and they have the longest path to the league. But by year 4, you would hope that maybe he starts getting some backup games and not just one and then sent back, like a string of them.
Yeah, I think that's what's frustrating too, because you don't want to hurry a goalie. We see how that can go sideways very quickly. And look at Nashville, for instance. So you want to do the right thing by not only him, but your team. But at the same time, you don't want to see that regression. I'm not trying to say that it is, but this is just how delicate of a situation it can be, because we all want to see Costa in Detroit. No doubt about it. And it sounds like for tonight in particular, he was left out to dry, that the D couldn't clear pucks, weren't playing well, and he was doing the best that he could given the hand that he was dealt. But at the same time, you also you look at the deal that was made with Mrazek. He's here for a year. Talbot still has a year remaining. They're still trying to give that buffer for all their younger players. And that's really been, I think, the mindset since day one with some of the contracts that he's handed out. And like defensively, you've got a lot that are expiring after next season to hopefully allow for some of your younger guys to knock the door down to cement themselves on the roster. And the same thing could be said now for the goaltending situation, which isn't a bad thing because it means you still can maintain control as the team. You're stretching out that entry level deal, and you're hopefully, if he does play out of the ELC, it's still going to be for a short term potential cost friendly or team friendly deal. So it sucks, but at the same time, it's just you can't hurry it for the sake of hurrying it, because a lot of people want the playoffs.
Yeah, that's kind of what they did, I feel like, with Devin Levi in Buffalo, where they're like, he's ready to go, let's throw him in, and they threw him in and he tanked. It was not good. So rushing a goalie can ruin their confidence. It can extend the time it takes for them to fully develop or even develop at all. So it's like the last thing you want to do is rush Kosa. It is, I still feel like that next season he will get some games in Detroit. He got one this season. Maybe he gets 4, 5, 6 next season. Maybe he kills it and plays himself into a position either in preseason or in the playoffs here. So we'll see what happens with Kosa, but the sound of it right now is that he will not start, because Yzerman was also asked about goalies, and Alex Lyon, he's like, yeah, some interest, but he made it sound like it's not going to happen. Like they'd have to make both sides work and not sure what makes sense. But then he also talked about exploring the goalie market and maybe looking at trades or free agencies and goalies. So that's even more kind of like an indication to me that Kosa's not going to start with the team. Even if he does overplay in camp, he'll have to earn his way in with solid play next season.
Well, and I think what's interesting at that point is that he didn't leave the door completely, or he didn't close the door completely being Yzerman about 3 goalies, because there's uncertainty with Alex Lyon. He did speak about him in a past tense, which upset some people on the X sphere. But if he earns it, he earns it. That's just the nature of it. And then you've got 3 goalies, because as we've seen the last couple of years, and I think that's what has also played into the fact that Alex Westland is now looking for a new job, is that anything can happen, but you need a hot hand, but you also need a consistent hand in the net. So
yeah,
if that is him as your day-to-day backup, maybe it works out. But you've heard the last several years, in particular with Kosa, they want him playing regular minutes. So being the backup is very unlikely.
Yeah, it was asked about Nate Danielson. He says he has a similar season to Casper in year 1. He's learned a lot and has improved as a player. Excellent skater, good puck skills. He said it's about learning to do a lot of the little things with and without the puck. And he kind of made the comparison to even himself at a point where it's like learning how to do just that extra stuff when you're not around the puck. And he said that, that's what you need to do to make it to the next level. He worked hard, even through a facial injury. He said he didn't miss a beat. He said he's not even sure he missed games. He says he just threw a cage on. He said in his words, a pretty significant facial injury. And he said he just threw a cage on and kept playing. So Nate's like, I feel like Nate's the gamer, kind of like Dylan Larkin's a gamer, where he's just going to keep playing. Like we saw Dylan Larkin come back from Four Nations, clearly kind of hurt and kept playing. Nate's that kind of guy. He was asked if he got a better feeling on guys like Wallander and Tuomisto. He said he like paused for a minute. He's like, basically, those are two completely different players. He said, because he was asked about their NHL readiness. He says they have different strengths. He said Wallander had a good year. He said they were encouraged by him. He said Tuomisto needs to gain foot speed to play in the NHL. He's too slow. Basically, he's always a half a step behind. Steve says Wallander has made big strides. He's becoming a well-rounded player. So that's good to see. I think Wallander was one that a lot of people may have lost a little bit of confidence in this season because you really didn't hear his name a lot. I watched a few Grand Rapids games. He didn't really stand out at all. And sometimes with defensemen, that's a good thing. As defensemen, you generally don't want to stand out. That means you're doing your job. But Wallander is a guy that they apparently have a lot of faith in.
Yeah, I mean, you hope so. With the way
right? Because that's how you're trying to build your team.
Yeah, because like I said, with the way the contracts play out, it opens the door for him to essentially walk right in. But like that doesn't mean that it's yours. I said that kind of oddly, but the opportunity is there for him to go take it. And it's really on him at this point over the next couple of seasons if he's shit or get off the pot, because there's going to be free agent signings. You don't know who else could end up. There could be a trade. Everything will essentially play against you if you don't do these things that the team is looking for. And they can just as easy just not sign you. And then you're gone. Your ELC's toast. So see you later.
So in free agency, Steve was asked, do players have an issue with not making the playoffs that stops them from coming here? He said, and pretty quickly, he's like, not anymore. He said, it depends on what they're looking for. He's like, some players are trying to win a cup. Like older players, that's maybe what they're trying to do before they retire. He's like, are they looking for money? Do they want to play with their friends? He says he doesn't anticipate having any issues. He says it's an enticing opportunity to play alongside top guys and push forward. And people make it sound like free agents aren't going to want to come here. They're not a playoff team, but we're not like 20 points out of the playoffs. We're not like 3-4 seasons ago when we were the worst team in the league. Like we're right on the edge. And I think good free agents know that maybe they're the guy that pushes them over. They see the coaching change and the streaks that they went on. I mean, they see the history of the team. I don't see any issues with signing free agents because every free agent that does sign, and even they've said, like when Steve Yzerman calls you, pick up the phone. That's what you do. So it's the respect for the general manager, respect for the organization, and looking at guys like Raymond, looking at guys like Sider and Larkin and DeBrincat and Patrick Kane, who by all intents and purposes is coming back next year.
Yeah.
That's something that I don't think anyone would have any hesitation joining.
No, and I think it speaks, you mentioned it, and we've loved it the last several seasons when Yzerman calls you listen. That's been the recurring theme coming into this season even. So to think that there's some kind of blocker, you do look for that, what's going to be your long-term success. And they've got the core that's building into place to do that. Now, what you're going to try to do is, you still need maybe one or two high-end talents. Hopefully they're going to be there from Grand Rapids here soon, but you also need one that could potentially be an immediate impact to your roster. And that's where I like that he kind of, for the first time I think ever, said that he's not afraid to go out and spend money this offseason to try to make that happen. The reality of it is, though, you've got 30 plus other teams trying to do the exact same thing if that one team they came from can't do it. And that's not even to say that the team, whoever it comes from, I'll just throw Marner out there just to piss people off because apparently that's upsetting now. You try to go after a Marner, Toronto's going to do everything in their power to keep him. They'll have the ability to, but will they? And does he want to? You would think yes, because you watch them out there. They've got one of the most dynamic power plays in all of hockey and some of the best young talent in all of hockey. You got Tavares' contract falling off. You should be able to make things happen, where unfortunately for us, Marner would stay in Toronto. That's the comments you want to hear as a fan.
They asked, does a thin free agent market make Yzerman more inclined to trade? Because you mentioned teams, the cap's going up. Teams are going to have money.
Yep.
Some will have way more money than others. A lot of them will not be able to afford. There will only be a handful of teams that will be able to afford a player like Mitch Marner at a $13.5 million or whatever he's going to command. But he says he's open to trades. He says young players have been moved into the core, but it isn't perfect yet. They'll look at it. He also said that I'm not afraid to trade picks. I'm not afraid to trade high-end prospects. He's like, I'm not really afraid to trade anyone as long as the deal is okay. Like it, but it's like people think that meant like he's going to trade Larkin, and there's no way Dylan Larkin is getting traded because you lose your 1C, you're set the rebuild back way far. It's not happening. But if he needs to trade a Nate Danielson with the emergence of Casper and a high pick to get a good player, or he needs to, like I said, shell out $13.5 million for 7 years for Mitch Marner. He has the money to do it. He's got the capital to do it. He's not afraid to do it. I think that was the big thing that he's like, yeah, man, like we see what these young kids are becoming. I'm not afraid to spend money, but neither are these other teams.
Well, just go back to the DeBrincat trade. He called that one out in particular. Then go back to his time in Tampa, the moves that he made. We've talked about it before when he first came on. He'll trade his captain if it means that you're going to improve your team for a shot at the Stanley Cup. Not saying that's going to happen with Larkin. It's quite the opposite. At least we think it is. Well, yes, it is because his contract says so.
Correct.
But that just shows that the history's there for him to get bold if he has to in terms of the trade market. I think ideally you're not trying to do those things through the trade to keep some of those assets to try to build with it. But they're now hopefully going into this offseason seeing that maybe there could be a surplus, or maybe if they have a decent playoff run here with Grand Rapids, maybe someone puts themselves at a different level. That could be a nice trade chip where you don't lose a Danielson, to your point. It's tough because there are some good names that are going to become UFAs, but how much money are they going to command, knowing damn well the cap's going up this year, the cap's going to be going up next year. You could see an extra $10 million in salary cap over the next 2 seasons, and that is going to play heavily into a lot of contracts.
Yeah, within the next 3 seasons, the NHL salary cap will be over $100 million easily, which is really cool because like you'll get an opportunity to get some really good players, but so will a lot of other teams. One thing I want to touch on really quick, and this is kind of where it got interesting. Steve was asked about Jake Wallman again, which I'm like, why? Can you guys just drop it? And he's like, do you regret it? And I think it was Rieger, like 97-1, always on the questions that were asked 2 years ago, bringing it up, right? Because they don't talk about hockey. But Steve says, I don't regret it. I won't elaborate on it. There are things I do not want to share about it. That's what he said. Wait, I wonder if that means that there was problems between Wallman and management, like everyone keeps saying there wasn't, and Steve panicked and threw him away. No, clearly there was, because Steve doesn't want to talk about it. So like, and why we keep bringing it up? Like, why do they keep bringing it up? Because, and I understand it's because that like Edmonton got they sent a first round pick to get him. That doesn't mean that was the right move.
No.
There was
it's a
clearly
team
something
that sucks
wrong
defensively.
Exactly. And then Rieger went on 97-1 and cried about it, basically, that Steve Yzerman yelled at me for asking about it.
Well, you also misquoted it when you posted it, so eat shit.
Amazing. Let's see, what else do I have? Oh, Steve was asked that does he think Carlos needs to
Are we
stop.
really going to bring up Carlos?
He needs to stop being let in the room. Let me see if I can find his quote. It was about him being on the hot seat. Does he think he's on the hot seat? Yeah, yes. Does he expect to be on the hot seat? And if he doesn't make the playoffs, should he keep his job? He says he really doesn't think about it or care what the reporter thinks. He's going to do what is best for the team. He's like, honestly, I don't even care what you think. I don't care if you think I should lose my job. It's not my job to worry about that. And I hate this kind of like what I would consider gotcha journalism. Like, let me ask you a question that I know is real stupid and see how you answer it.
It's Carlos Monterrez. He figured out ways to bitch about one of the best seasons in Lions football history. The dude is a miserable human being, and the fact that he's allowed to even cover sports for the city of Detroit is an utter embarrassment to actual good sports writers out there.
End quote from Ryan. Maybe Rieger will quote that Carlos. Incorrectly.
God.
So the last thing that I kind of want to touch on is that Steve was asked about offer sheets, which is something we've brought up a couple times. I think that even yesterday I said that I think a offer sheet on someone like Keandre Miller would be a good move to try and solidify your defense and get him from a Rangers team who's not very good. But Yzerman says that he'd never really considered them, but then maybe he'll take a different position seeing what St. Louis was able to do with offer sheets. He says you can overpay and miss and upset people, but is it something to consider? Yes, but he probably won't do it. So he went back and forth. He's like, am I going to do it? I don't know. It's something I'll consider. Probably not, but there's a chance that I'll do it because look, it worked for St. Louis. So I think that there are a couple players who would be worth an offer sheet. I think there are a couple teams that would be hard pressed to match an offer sheet even with the rising cap this season and the amount of players they'll have to re-sign. But at the same time, is it just easier to not burn a relationship, give up too many assets, and trade for an RFA's rights for a team that doesn't think that they can sign that player to what they want to be signed to? And like, I think that's a great situation with someone like a Berggren, where if you think he needs a different situation, you need that spot on the team, maybe someone trades a pick for his rights and they don't have to offer sheet and they don't have to pay picks, like more picks than they should. Same thing with K'Andre Miller. Maybe you offer something to the Rangers and you can get basically the signing rights for him.
I think that's your best case scenario. And I would love to see that level of aggressiveness because that's a guy that will immediately make your defense better. And that's not even to say that's going to shut you down from being able to do anything in UFA on the UFA space. Yeah, Miller's going to probably want something in terms of a decent deal. You're still with plenty of room to go do something big, if you want to call it big.
Yeah, I think just to round it out, the press conference and the episode is that it sounds like there is, because of the coaching change and because of how they performed in winning those 7-game stretches, that going into the offseason, there's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of optimism from the players who are excited to work with the coaching staff in the offseason to basically complete their new identity. Like we mentioned, I think it was last episode, that during the season, you can change stuff, but you can't overhaul an entire system while you're still playing games. You can do that in the offseason. Todd even said, and this is one that I thought was really interesting because we had also talked about, like, do we think Todd will have any influence on Yzerman's decisions in the offseason? Do we think that he will have any influence on players coming up and down or trades being made or free agent signings? And a lot of people are like, no, that's simply for the GM and the coach has nothing to do with it. But Todd said he'll spend a lot of time with Steve looking at the roster, the AHL, and free agency for fits, and work with players through camp to get more comfortable with the way they want to play. And I think that is the biggest thing and a reason that Yzerman brought in someone that's been around the league for such a long time, because he knows a lot of the players. He's been around a lot of the players. He knows who will be a fit. I think Todd McLellan, for lack of a better, I guess, term, is an extra scout in a sense, because he has coached so many games in this league and has watched so many players in this league that I think that'll help a lot. So I think Yzerman will lean on him a little bit for help with roster construction and guys he wants to see out there because there's that experience. And when you have a guy like Newsy, who's like a first-time head coach, I feel like as a GM, maybe it's a lot of hand-holding. You have to make all the decisions because you don't know if you can trust that guy to 100% make those lineup calls because he's never done it before. As where you get a guy who's coached for such a long time, you give him the reins, you ask for his opinion, you ask who would be guys that would better fit in his system, and he's able to give you solid answers.
Yeah, I think he's even hinted at the fact that he's going to be vocal in trying to support Yzerman this offseason with player management, if you will. And I think that right there is already a very big change in what we saw the last couple seasons with Lalone. I mean, yeah, we learned quickly that Lalone was a player's coach, that he was all about the relationships he could build with them. But now we're seeing kind of the flip side of that, where McLellan is going to go to bat for his guys, but he's also going to ride the shit out of you to get the best out of you. If you're not going to give that effort, you might as well find a new home.
And that's kind of what they need. We said there's a fine line, and we've said this historically, there's a fine line between being a red ass coach and being an asshole. Like there's a difference between a Tortorella and a Babcock. You want to be the Tortorella. You want to pump your team up when they're down, but you also want to demand a lot from them, which is what guys like John Tortorella do. Is they're a very demanding coach, but Torts has admitted himself that as he has coached is not the same game. And guys respond a lot differently to things now than they did in the 90s, than they did in the early 2000s. but they still respond well to pressure to be better and pressure to change what they are doing in order to improve their game and the team around them. And you can enforce that without being a complete asshole.
Well, even on the Tor's point, he's stated that he's had to evolve, and you've
As
seen
you
with some of
should.
yeah, you have to. I mean, the way that the game has changed. I know that I think he still has quite the heavy opinion in regards to iPads on the bench, but that's a different story. But that's again why he essentially. I mean, he's not interested in a rebuild, and I'm trying not to get off subject here, but he won't be missing out on a job for very long, and I'm a little bit intrigued on guy like as you saw him. There's now Rick Tockett's back on the market. He didn't decide to come or stay with Vancouver. You got Sullivan. There's a lot of top tier talent that either is going to fall into the head coaching job realm or a solid assistant, which I'd be intrigued by some of those names as an assistant. With going back to McLellan, it's a guy that continues to learn, and it's very obvious he has figured out a lot of the ins and outs of this team as it stands, but he wants to make sure that he is setting them up for success going into this offseason and into the new season, especially after or leading into July 1st. And whether or not there is a big impact there is to be seen, but you have to be excited for what is to come with him in charge.
Maybe if John Tortorella believed in iPads, the Red Wings would have made the playoffs last season. Ryan, I want to get your final thoughts before we sign off tonight.
Final thoughts. Try to watch the Griffins. I totally didn't realize they were actually on YouTube for free this evening, so that was a bummer, but I guess not, because it's 4-0, 5 minutes into the third. They're actually out shooting Texas, but playoff hockey, it's back and it's wonderful, and I miss it a lot. Hopefully next year we're not having this conversation of despair and sadness and wishing that we were not on the outside looking in. As a whole, I feel like with the takeaways, you got to be a bit happier than
Optimistic.
than what it could have been in terms of a doom and gloom type of press conference. They came out, they were prepared, obviously, but they also acknowledged that there was an expectation that was not met. They called out the staff, they called out the team, and he kind of called out himself. He's like, it's still on me as the general manager in Yzerman. So I think that there's a renewed, I don't want to call it sense of urgency, but a renewed focus on how they need to make this team an organization better to get them back towards extreme relevance.
Sense of responsibility.
And I to me, that's a positive, a giant positive takeaway, even though it's not what we'd hoped for. Already ran 33.
Yeah, if you want to watch the Griffins, we have a post over on our Twitter. If you can sign up for Flow Hockey through us, we've got a partner code. We partner with Flow Hockey now, and you can sign up, and then we get a little bit of money on the back end, and it helps the podcast. So yeah, if you plan on doing that, just go to our Twitter. You can find the post. It's got a big picture of Sebastian Cosa's face on it, and you can sign up through there. Yeah, let's go Leafs. Let's kind of end the Ottawa Senators run tonight. It is 1-0 Ottawa with 16 minutes left in the third, so we'll see how that happens. But I agree. I think it's a renewed sense of responsibility. It was an optimistic press conference. If you took anything else away than that Yzerman's ready and willing to do what he needs to do, that guys aren't afraid to come here, and that they expect a lot more from the group, and that Todd seems like he's willing and able to do that, I think that's very positive for this team. So I think it'll be good going forward. You can follow me online at Bringing the Wing. You can follow the Grindline Podcast online at Grindline Pod. Give a shout out to the Hockey Podcast Network and thank them for hosting us and spreading us around. Vintage Detroit, which is the only place you should get your Detroit jerseys from and worked on, and where we have an exclusive t-shirt collection. You can go there, click on the Keep It Local tab, and click on Grindline Podcast to find our designs. And we would love for you to go over to YouTube, search Grindline Podcast, sub to us, and turn on those notifications. You'll get notified whenever an episode goes live. But that is going to do it for us tonight. So for Ryan, I am Greg. You stay classy, Hockey Town.